Welcome to Women of Steel with me, Miriam Grace, the podcast where women who've had their mettle tested help us make important links for ourselves. I talk to remarkable women about their lives and challenges through the lens of my own work as a psychotherapist. We uncover stories which challenge the power of the status quo and validate the voices of marginalised or disadvantaged women. There's a time in life when it doesn't just rain but pours, and many women juggling career, family, caring for elderly parents can feel quite overwhelmed, and then perimenopause and menopausal symptoms hit in. Still, many of us carry on, carrying being our default, and then for some a last straw event, shock or trauma can trigger further health problems. I was keen to talk to Helen Samson Mullen about her story and her trigger for autoimmune illness, and to understand more about how she's changed her approach to life. Helen was born and raised in the northeast of England and now lives in the USA. She was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at the end of 2018. Incidentally, her degrees and PhD in physiological sciences, gastrointestinal research, and qualification as a professional certified coach meant that she was in a position to be able to make changes and to reflect on a new approach to life. And today I'm here with Helen Samson Mullen, and she's the co-creator and co-host of a podcast called the Autoimmune Campfire. Helen was born and raised in the northeast of England and now lives in Wilmington, Delaware, and you'll have some interesting time trying to decipher her accent, I think, on this podcast. Helen was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at the end of 2018, and I would love to ask you, Helen, welcome. I want to ask you about, you wrote to me that the autoimmune experience has been giving you many invitations to accept, to learn, to grow and heal. So I'd love to hear more about how you are today and how you got to where you are, and then about the podcast later on.
Oh, lovely. Well, first, it's so lovely to meet you, and thank you very much for having me on your podcast. I'm delighted to be here. So I am feeling, I had an infusion yesterday, which is part of my treatments for rheumatoid arthritis. And so we were talking a little bit before coming into the episode about how I may be a little wonky. Sometimes, I feel absolutely great, and sometimes I don't. So it's a monthly treatment, and we roll with it. So, and I'm really thankful because of this treatment, I was actually able to get my life back and walk and do all the things that I was enjoying before. So I'm really, really very thankful. What I would say is the last 6 years, I guess we're coming into the 7th year since diagnosis, have been really challenging and also filled with some opportunities. And so I think in the pit of the challenges, I wasn't able to see those opportunities, and now coming through them, it's that constant, it's not a one and done. It's a constant, it's like I mentioned, it's like being on a roller coaster, and I don't like roller coasters. And it's like being on a roller coaster, it's sort of vulnerability on steroids, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes literally. And so it's the ups and downs can feel really brutal. And it's also having some practices and a great support system and community really helps you navigate those ups and downs. So
yeah. I'm just realizing, Helen, that you were diagnosed in 2018, and we've spoken about my cancer experience, which began in 2017. So you and I have been on a similar length journey, and it seems to me that, I had this sort of trajectory of my life going in a particular direction. And at first I thought, oh, I'm sick, so I'm just gonna, take a little sidestep, be sick, then I'll get well and come back onto this same pathway. And I
Mhm.
didn't know at that point around diagnosis that I would never
Mhm.
go back
Mhm.
onto the original path, that the pathway changed, and
Yes.
I went a different direction. Does that feel resonant for you?
So true. So true.
Mm.
And you heard it during the pandemic with people saying we want to go back to normal. And
Mm.
there really wasn't a normal after the pandemic. It was a new normal.
Yeah.
And I definitely felt that from an autoimmune perspective, which is the life that I imagined that I would have
Mm.
completely changed.
Yes.
And the what I would say now is um, I think I've I think with intention, I've been able to tip back to thriving. But there were
Yes.
times when it felt really so it didn't feel survivable at times.
Yeah.
And so it
Yeah.
was really challenging.
Yeah.
But I think, and I know it sounds, and I think one of the other issues is with a diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis, people go, "Oh yeah, I know what that is. My grandma had arthritis."
Yes.
And they don't realize that it's an autoimmune inflammatory disease
Yes.
that in fact
Yes.
impacts your whole body.
Yes.
Your heart, your organs, your like
Mm.
it, so it, yes, and your joints. But
Yes.
but when people say, um, "Oh, I have MS," they're like, "Ooh." Like we know that's serious, but
Mm.
rheumatoid arthritis people just don't seem to know. And so there's these sort of like series of empathy misses like, wait, why is she
Mm.
not coming to this? Because
Mm.
well, because
Yeah.
I can't walk today, but
Yeah.
maybe I'll walk tomorrow, right? So
Yes.
it's a sort of, it's really, it's not a very well known
No, and when you're talking
thing.
about the empathy miss, it's cultural. It's
Mhm.
it's culture wide, isn't it?
Mhm.
And this is the thing. Whatever um, I'm dealing with clients in the therapy room, it often boils down to that empathy miss. I
Mhm.
think that we can go through all sorts of horrific experiences if we can tell our story, if we can be
Mhm.
believed, if we can be understood and supported, we can
Mhm.
come through. But
Yeah.
it's the loneliness of the
Mhm.
experience that can make it so
Mhm.
desperate. And I'm wondering, when you said you had moments where you just didn't know if you could survive, what
Mhm.
what what was that like? I'm
Mhm.
partly asking, not to make you miserable,
No.
relive that, but just because I know there'll be people listening
Mhm.
who have never heard their experience,
Mhm.
um, you know, from somebody else. So
Yeah.
what when you felt this isn't survivable? What sort of a day was that like for you, Helen?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I go back right to the very beginning, so just to sort of give you a little bit of context. So in 2017, my mom was diagnosed with cancer.
Mm.
Then, so I was traveling to and from England
Mm.
to help take care of her with my two sisters, who are
Mm.
fabulous. And um, my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at the same time. And then my mom passed in March 2018.
Mm.
And then I was still going to and from England to help take care of my
Mm.
dad because he couldn't live alone. So between the three of us, we were sort of taking
Yes.
things,
Yeah.
stints with him.
Mm.
And I had two children in high school and a
Mm.
full-time job. So I was traveling a lot for work, which the work I love, but
Mm.
traveling a lot
Mm.
for work, and I'm a homebody. And, then traveling to England and taking care of my father, which, he's wonderful. And it was really meaningful time, but really heavy lift a lot.
Yeah.
So when I was diagnosed in 2000, at the end of 2018, I was absolutely exhausted. I think I had an emergency appendectomy in August
Oh
that
my
year.
goodness.
And then when I was getting my dad from, I would take him up to the Northeast so he could be home for a couple weeks. I was taking him back, and we had to change train to my sister's in near London. And I was in York Station, and he got startled and took off. And I had all the bags, and I'm like trying to catch him,
Yeah.
because we're changing train. And I didn't, what if he gets on another train and all these things? And I fell on the stairs going up over one of those railway
Yes,
bridges.
yes, yes, I can picture it.
Yeah, and I hit my hand and I hit my knee, and I felt like this huge kind of nothing I've ever felt before or since, this sort of like electrical, like, and I thought, oh God, I've broken something. And it wasn't a break, but it was like a neural kind of thing. And I thought, uh-oh. Anyway, I kept going. People were asking, so kind, can I help you? I was like, oh, I just gotta get the, like didn't accept help, of course. Caught him. And then the next day flew back to the States. The next day I was on site in DC at a client. And when I was coming back on the train that day, my knee swelled and I couldn't get up I had to hop off the train. And my husband picked me up and the kids, and we were going out for dinner. And I said, something's weird with my knee. And that was the start of it. So it was sort of
Right.
this thing where it just all of a sudden, my life
Yes.
pivoted in a moment.
Yes.
And I had my knee drained, and they put steroid in, and they said they did some tests, and then they were like, oh, I don't really know. And then they lost my test results. So
Oh.
for like over a month, I was wondering what was happening. And in that time, I was just, I couldn't walk. My knee, I lost like 2 centimeters of muscle around my left thigh
Yeah.
because it was just so swollen. I just couldn't work. And so, and at that point, and I had this rheumatologist who I was, could get into fast. And, rheumatologists are incredible humans, just to say that. And there aren't so many of them. This one wasn't particularly a fit for me. And basically said, I want to get you on medicines, even though we don't have your bloods yet, because I think I know what's happening. And I said, well, I'm a scientist. So I'm like, I don't
Yes.
want to be
Yeah.
treated for something that I don't know I have yet. And I'm looking at the side effects of all these medicines, and I'm thinking, I'll wait for my blood, so we'll just redo them. And it turned out that I did have a diagnosis of moderate to severe rheumatoid arthritis. So at the point that he got my bloods back, he said, "Oh yeah, those medicines won't work. We'll have to go heavier."
Yeah.
And he did this whole, and I said, "Well, can I just think about it?" I'm a thinker.
Did you believe it? I
I
mean, did you?
I just did. I just was so shocked. I mean, I'd been reading up around it and researching around it, and um, I don't know if that was the right thing because it was quite terrifying, like some of the facts that they put out there, I think are somewhat dated and probably are from before biologics. So, it sort of tells you how much your life expectancy is reduced, and things like this. And I was like, wait, what? So, and then I have a close relative who has an autoimmune condition who managed to reverse everything with diet and exercise and yoga and all these things. And I thought, well, why not me?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was pretty hard-headed at the beginning, and probably because he said to me, you will never get better without medicine, and you will always be ill. And I thought, oh, part of me was a little feisty, and I was like, I didn't really like that. It felt like being a little hexed. So
Yes.
I thought, okay, well, so I did some research, more research, and I went on a whole food plant-based diet, and was moving, and I started some somatic therapy, and I was doing all the
All
things.
the things.
But looking back on it, it was like all those things are really good, but it was like I talk about this. It's like you have this huge inferno and you have a pipette of water and you're just putting little drops in it. Like the
Yes,
train had
yes,
left the station
yeah,
and I was in mass inflammation. So there were days when I went very quickly into a wheelchair. There were days when I couldn't get to the bathroom because I couldn't use my
yeah,
hands on the wheelchair and I couldn't stand on my feet.
yes, yes,
Those were the days where I just thought, what am I doing here?
yeah,
Like, if this is my life, I don't know the level of pain and the level of discomfort. It was just, it wasn't a life. It was really so uncomfortable. It was, and I didn't want to
yeah,
be a burden. Like, I just
yes,
did it.
yeah. I think,
It's that
yeah,
whole burden thing.
I'm having a, a sort of a bit of an aha moment, and I think, from my own experience and from client experience, and just, from the psychology of this, which is somehow when we get reduced, excuse me for being blunt, to wee and poo, when we get to a point where, our toilet training means nothing and we
Yeah.
can't manage without help, we're right back to the neediness of a baby.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's just, it's just that, for me at times, has been the step too far. That's
Hmm.
the point, when I said, what's it like when you had a day where you thought, I can't get
Yeah.
through this isn't
Yeah.
survivable. I think
Yeah.
the moments that I've had, and I've had it through illness, but I also had it. I remember when I had my postpartum blues, day 3, and I
Hmm.
remember that I couldn't go to the toilet, and the nurse said, go, just go into the
Yeah.
shower because I was so swollen
Yeah.
and so on. She said, go in the shower, and I remember, because you get that hormone drop, don't you, 3 days afterwards. I remember crying in the shower, how can I be a mother if I can't even go to the toilet? And I think it
Yeah.
just reduces us to,
Yeah.
and yet, what you've been through, what I've been through, and what people listening who've experienced some of the, being reduced and not being able to manage the toilet on our own,
Hmm.
is preparation, isn't it? It's preparation for, further down the line, and really,
Hmm.
really facing that. And one sort of little gem that I've learned along the way is that very often with my clients, when I say, well, imagine your old age, imagine your dependency, what they tend to project into that image is their infancy. So if
Oh,
they were
interesting.
neglected, they'll say, "Oh, I'll be in a nursing home, and no one will come and visit me, and I'll wear dirty clothes, and no one will brush my hair."
Oh.
If they were abused, they tend to fear that they'll be in a nursing home and the staff will be abusing them. And if they had a fairly happy childhood, they can sort of project or imagine things being okay more easily. So it's quite an interesting thing, for anybody listening to understand that the last time we were dependent was probably, 0 to 3 at this level that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that if we fear, it's not so much old age, is it? But we fear being
Hmm.
dependent. We fear
Hmm.
being in a home and somebody having to deal with those needs.
Yeah.
That some of the fear might simply be projection of the only memory we have as to
Hmm.
whether other people are dependable.
Yeah.
Now I know that you've also had an incredible support system,
Hmm.
and that's not to say that you haven't felt alone with this,
Hmm.
but that you have had an incredible support system. And we were just talking about our mutual friend Imogen
Yes.
and another friend of yours, Justine. How
Mhm.
Obviously that's a bit of a privilege, isn't it? To
Yeah.
not everybody has Imogens and Justines in their lives,
Yeah.
but why do you think that was so important to you to have these friendships, and what did they mean to you?
Oh, I mean, I feel incredibly fortunate. Justine I met in university, so
Mm,
we've been friends for decades and best friends for decades. She's
mm,
just the most incredible human.
mm,
She's also a GP, so
mm,
has a perspective that
mm,
is really helpful, and she's
mm,
just so honest and kind and empathetic and warm. So
mm.
I think one of the things that was really hard at the beginning. So, I mean, I just want to preface that I'm not in a wheelchair right now. I walk miles a
Mm,
day.
mm,
I I I finally got over my hard-headedness and started on medicine. I'm on my fourth regimen now, which seems to, knock on wood, be working pretty well.
mm,
So I just want to say I'm in a very different space,
mm.
but I had to get to that through,
Yes.
there was this whole I'm getting back to Justine in a
Mm,
second, but there's
mm.
this whole thing that when you're sick, you did something wrong in our culture.
Yes,
And
yes.
possibly even in my family of origin. My mom was a
Mm,
nurse and but really liked the sort of all natural stuff as
mm,
well. And my grandma had gout and would put, apple cider poultices with mustard and things on her knees. And so there was
mm,
this thing of we can do this,
mm.
without anything else. And and Justine, I had this sort of that shame of illness, right? And Justine would
Yeah.
just say, it just is, Helen. You didn't do anything to deserve
Yes.
this. You didn't. And
Yes.
she just really held me in this amazing, just common sense, warm embrace of
Mm,
just
mm,
being there. She called, she was, I mean, we speak every week, and
mm,
it's just, she's just like been this steady in my life, and we can laugh. And when she comes to see me, it's so funny when she tells stories of university
mm,
stories, and
mm.
my children are like, she did what?
Yeah.
Because they see me as the serious, prudent mom.
Yeah, yeah.
And not, they don't
Mm,
remember me the way that Justine does. Like she's
yes.
seen my whole life arc, really.
Yes, yes,
Um, so she reminds me of who I was and who I am. And
yes.
she just has been with me along this path. So it's amazing to have a friend like that.
Yeah, well, I think this does bring us back to this whole idea of visibility, doesn't it? When you
Yeah.
said
Mhm.
she sees you as you are, and she
Mhm.
also, because she's a GP, she sees patients, and she sees the random nature of
Mhm.
stuff happens to
Mhm.
people, and it isn't their fault.
Yeah.
um, you know, and it's a really hard thing to get our head around, but I think that believing it's our fault is a way of feeling as if we have agency, when the truth is far more scary, which is that that things happen that
Yes.
that in a moment send you off that trajectory. So in that moment that you fell,
Mhm.
and it's crazy, isn't it? But I sort of think, what was that ping that you felt? It was like
Yes.
that we a neuro
Yeah.
pathway, wasn't it? It was like ping, right? Something that's been lying dormant.
Yeah.
It's
Something
like,
broke.
yeah, something broke, and
Something.
then this thing got set in motion. And of course, with a lot of autoimmune things, it will be this moment, this
Mhm.
stressor, and it
Mhm.
pings it, but it doesn't mean it's our fault.
No,
you know
no. I
mm,
mean, I remember getting a second opinion at Johns Hopkins, University Hospital,
mm,
and the rheumatologist said, I can't tell you how many women I see your
mm,
age,
mm,
just coming through the menopause, had an
mm.
emergency surgery, did the whole sandwich thing,
Yeah,
sick parents, children in school,
yeah,
and then boom, just like that, right? She said,
mm,
so I do think there is something. to that.
Yes.
Um, and also, I love your perspective on that, because I think that as a recovering perfectionist pleaser, it's like that. If I can control it, like, can I just
Yeah.
control
Yeah.
what this, like, if I just work harder,
Yes.
can I make
Yes.
this go away?
Yes. And
And no,
and
you can't.
yeah, and hence all the process that I'm sure any of us who've been through these sorts of challenges of plant-based diet and
Yeah,
this, and and like you say, it's not that those are unhelpful things. They're good things, but it's it part of it is the denial of
mhm,
just the powerlessness and the random nature. And
yeah,
we can come up with all sorts of things. It's karma from a past life, or it's a punishment for this, that, or the other. But the truth is scarier than that, which is we there's no apparent meaning. There's no sense to
mhm,
it. It is, as far as we can understand or see, it
mhm,
is meaningless as
yeah,
to who it happens to. And and this is something I quite often come back to, just because of my upbringing. Through most of my life, my dad was writing a commentary on the book of Job, and what's so interesting is the questions that you and I are grappling with, were being grappled with, in this ancient book, written before Christ, which is everything goes wrong for him, and his cattle die, and he gets plagues, and it goes on and on, and he's saying, why to God, why is this happening to me?
yeah,
And I just think it's fascinating
yeah.
that people have been trying to come up with explanations for things happening for so long, but there isn't a rational sort of answer, not even in the Bible.
No.
So
And I think
interesting.
that's what I needed to hear from Justine, was it just is, and
Mm,
just almost forgive myself for for
yeah.
having that. Oh, it has to be, or it must be something, or because you
Mm,
feel like you have very little agency at times.
yes.
You
Yes.
do, you
Yeah.
do, and you can grow it.
Yeah.
Um, but then back to Imogen. Gosh, I met
Mm,
Imogen
mm.
um several years ago now, and I actually even joined the Y to go to one of her Alexander teacher classes because I'd
Yes.
heard
Yeah.
about it in England, and I was like, ooh, I
Mm.
really want to see this. And then another friend, and then it turns out she lives in the development next to the development I live in.
Yes.
So we started, I went to her class, and it was phenomenal because she's
Mm,
phenomenal.
mm.
And and then we started, I was getting my American citizenship at that point, and she was
Yes.
about to apply. And
Yes.
so we sort of connected over that. And then we both had our own businesses, and we connected over that. So we
Mm.
started this walking mastermind. And now, I mean, I just count her as a really dear friend. And we walk every week together. And, in those darkest times, she checked in on me every single day. In those darkest times, if I couldn't walk, she would push my wheelchair, or she would say, I'll just come for a cup of tea. In the worst times in the pandemic, because let me tell you, being in a pandemic, being immune compromised in a
Yes.
pandemic, it's no joke.
No.
And right. And she would we'd walk on opposite sides of the street and have our phones on and talk to each other while we were walking.
That's just
Just to be
beautiful.
in
Mm,
human connection.
mm,
And
mm,
um and then we started to do this book club with books that we like to read, and we sort
mm,
of read and then discuss them.
mm.
And now I decided I really want to do a little bit more creativity, and we've got this amazing arts center
Mm, mm,
in our community now.
mm,
And so we've been doing those classes together. And so now every Sunday we get together and we paint
mm.
or we play with something creative. And it's been such a boost. Just even just seeing the colors and the, whatever we do. I mean, last Sunday I was an epic fail. I was dipping rocks in paint to paint rocks, and it was an epic fail, but it was so fun. It got
Yeah, yeah,
messy.
yeah.
And Imogen did this fabulous sort of moving painting, and I was like, oh, I really like hers, and I don't like mine, but I had fun today. So it's sort of
Yes.
these things where, so I mean, I feel like we both walked and talked through the loss of really three of our parents, to her two parents
Yes.
and
Yes.
my one, and really my father, who, bless him, is 90 and has Alzheimer's and is in a care home and is happy as anything and just a great, lovely human being, even in his
Yes.
confusion. And it helps me to have that. We have that same, that frame where
Yes.
can say, did this happen for you? Or what do you make of this? Or, and she really helped me in the early days of don't be like you can remember, just play
Yeah.
along with them. And that has been
Yes.
a gift. You know,
Yes.
I called him and he's sitting in his winter coat and his summer hat and he's at the train station waiting to go back home. And I can say, oh, lovely. I'm glad you've got your hat with you. What's the
Yes.
first thing you want to do when you get back home?
Yes.
And
Yes.
Minchella's ice cream. I mean, he knows. It's part
Yes.
of him. Because
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's the metaphor if he actually wants to go back to South Shields or it's home as in a
Yeah.
resting place.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's so poignant, isn't it? And I think, I can't remember the phrase you used, but it was before we started recording. It was something about when life happens, but you used a particular phrase. I don't know if you can remember
Oh,
either.
when life gets lifey.
When life gets lifey, yes. And I think this is it, isn't it? There's something about your friends have witnessed you before and during
Hmm. Hmm.
the health issues that you've been through and the life issues,
Yes.
when life's got lifey, and there's something about that, having somebody witness our reality and see us, and I think that's really healing. And I know that the stance that you take around you've improved, but you're
Hmm.
not healed. You're not, you're not better. You have an autoimmune condition. You have rheumatoid arthritis, and there's something, about holding, both places. It's like you're not responsible for your autoimmune condition, but you are responsible for how you respond
Hmm.
to yourself.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yes, yes. And I think that's one of the hardest things about an autoimmune condition is that, as far as we know at this point, there is no cure. So it really
Mm.
is, it's a constant
Mm.
piece. And you can be doing all of the right things
Mm.
and still have a flare.
Mm. Mm.
So I think that's one of the things, it's almost like you got to just walk the path with uncertainty and make friends
Mm.
because it is what
Mm.
it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's often like life, but I think it's more intense.
Yes, walking the path with uncertainty
Yeah.
is, that's very much, my, my philosophy as
Yeah.
well. So we're going to take a little break now, Helen, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how you help and encourage others, including the autoimmune Campfire podcast, and all this will be in the show notes for people. I really would encourage them to subscribe to your podcast as well as mine, because of course you know this as well. The more subscribers we have, the more when we invite guests to come on, the more encouraged they'll be to come on if they feel that their voice will be heard. And there's something healing, isn't there, about having your voice heard, and I think that's so important. So we'll go to a break now. When we come back, I think you've got some wise and compassionate words for our listeners, which come from, you know, you having to develop a wise and compassionate internal voice towards yourself. Women of Steel is a podcast hosted by women for women. We aim to amplify the voices of remarkable everyday women, particularly those who are marginalised or disadvantaged. If you're enjoying this episode, some of our earlier episodes on chronic illness might resonate. For example, Jermaine Heifer talks about the importance of creativity in her life, where she is largely bedbound.
This is who I am. This, under the layers of illness and under the weight of all that illness, you know, trapping me to the bed and making me unable to sort of perhaps smile and sing and skip through the forest or whatever else, you know. This is who I am. This is what I believe in.
And Grace Quantock challenges some of the oppressive wellness narratives and encourages listeners and readers of her new book, Living Well with Chronic Illness, to write their own roadmap to well-being in resisting inspiration, disability justice and living well with chronic illness.
It's like the attitudes of other people. So it's what we call stares, as in people staring at you, and stairs as in the can't walk upstairs.
The ideas of connection, well-being and friendship are explored further as significantly important in developing resilience during challenging times in episode 11 with me and Imogen Ragone.
We're always responding to our environment, but also to each other's nervous systems. We respond at a nervous system to nervous system level.
And menopause, ageing and women's wisdom are central to one of our most popular episodes, The Everyday Witchcraft of Ordinary Hags, speaking with our guest Karen Shimwell.
I think a lot of people are fearful of words like crone or hag to describe ageing women. I'm very much in the business of reclaiming those. I think cronehood brings with it blessings that we do not know otherwise. The business of owning your anger, the business of not caring about some things that were formerly so important, so stupidly important. It's a blessing to let go of them, it really is, and to arrive at a point where you can own, you know, your experience and own your wisdom.
I hope you're enjoying this episode and that you'll continue to listen and to subscribe to the Women of Steel with Miriam Grace podcast. So welcome back after the break, and today I'm talking to Helen about, really about thriving when you do have an autoimmune condition. And before the break we were talking about the vulnerability, and we went right into the messiness of almost pre-potty training moments, and the distress it can bring about when we're that needy. And then we were also talking about our support systems and, you know, the people that help us. And I think this is the thing, isn't it, Helen? Is how do we be needy with grace? And you know, and perhaps we can't do it with grace. Perhaps we are just really messy. And who do we let see us like that? And, you know, it's not safe for everybody in our lives to see us like that. Not everybody's nice. You know, we mentioned a couple of really nice people in your life, and that was very healing for you to be seen by them. But, we've also, we're saying in the break there's a lot of internalized dislike of neediness, sick people. We have those feelings and internalizations, and people around us might, so that, in terms of exposing our neediness to other people, we could be quite right that some people don't want to see us, or don't want to respect us when we're sick. So yes, tell me about how easy it was for you to be vulnerable, and who you let see you.
It was actually quite challenging, recovering perfectionist, pleaser. I'm just used to doing everything, and it was really challenging. It was very humbling, and I don't know if I've quite got to the grace piece of it yet, but that's my goal. And I think it was, I think being an executive coach and grounded in values and strengths, and we talked about and the work of Brene Brown, and I do feel like that has helped me immensely, right? Because I can lean into my values. I can see those in others, right? So I love that. My husband is just he has top values around hope, and so he's always looking on the positive side of things, and but you've not, I know this is a tough day, but those flares are lasting less than they did at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So he kind of helps point me in the right direction, and his love language is acts of service. So I always have a cup of tea by me that he's made, even if he chops the ginger himself, which is that's over and above, I think.
Yeah.
And then I have my daughter is amazing, and she is super supportive and super sensitive, so she kind of picks up on what's going on, and is very, very supportive, and also really honest. Like, she was the person who said, "Mom, it's time, you got to take meds now, we're losing you." Right? She had that brave conversation.
Yeah.
And my son too, he is sweet and tender, and also really will, take me for infusions too, and all the things. And I'm really lucky that I have 3 lovely friends right in my neighborhood who I walk with almost daily, or weather permitting, who were also there, who sort of pushed me in the wheelchair.
Yes. Yes.
Super lucky that Nona was there for me. Like, when I was diagnosed, Nona was living in Zambia,
Right.
and she left me Marco Polos every day to check in with me.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
these are the people who didn't look away or didn't disappear in the hardness of it.
Yeah.
And then the team I work with, like our CEO, our leadership team, and the coaches who I work with, talk about feeling seen and having those deep, important, meaningful conversations. It's just part of what we do, what we're trained to do. But having colleagues who are so good at empathy, oh my
Yes.
gosh, and no drama,
Yeah.
oh my gosh,
Yes. Yes.
it's amazing.
Yes. And yet, it's like all these people are great people, but even so, and we're saying it's a privilege, isn't it, that you and I both have such supportive partners who care for us and see us, and such good friends. And some of the people listening just won't even have a team like that. But even though your team is full of lovely, warm, empathic people, one of the biggest obstacles you have to overcome is that vulnerability, showing yourself, saying, I'm messy. This is messy, and I'm doing everything wrong, and I'm saying I'm going to go to something. This is me. I'm saying I'm going to go to something, and then realizing that that's crazy. You can't even walk. Why? Why do you think you're going to go to a party?
Right.
And just feeling bad all the time, and stuck between how we think we're supposed to be presenting and how we truly are. Yes.
Which I think is really funny, because people say, if I actually make it to the party, they say, well, you look great. And I think,
Yes.
in a way, would I want it to be opposite, that I feel great and look terrible? I don't know. But the autoimmune thing is, I mean, obviously, if they look closely at my joints, they can see I have permanent damage, But if they, because of my delayed start of treatment, but I do think it is interesting that you present a certain way and people are like, oh, great, you're here, you're great, when you actually might be feeling really not great.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm, one of the things I think that was the hardest for me was when people say, oh, could you come to this? And I would always say yes. And then now I'm like, hopefully yes, because I don't know on that day.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got there's a Super Bowl party this weekend, and my husband's team is in the Super Bowl. Everybody's super excited. Daughter's coming back from college, son's flying in. I mean, it's a whole thing.
Right. Okay.
And I want to be there. I really want to be there. But it's also it'll be a room full of 100 people. So, and I just had an infusion. So I'm going to need to mask because my immune system is compromised, like most compromised at this weekend.
You're talking literally wear a mask,
Yes.
but also you will be psychologically masking as well.
Well, and because there are people like, you don't need to wear that. We're all vaccinated, or something like that. And actually, it doesn't matter, right? Because I just had a respiratory virus that delayed my infusion 2 weeks. So I'm already in a little bit of rocky territory. So I don't want to get something else.
No.
And right now we have COVID, flu, RSV, and pneumonia filling hospital beds.
Yes.
So, could you just trust me I'm just going to wear my mask.
You're going to look after yourself. Yeah.
And I'm going to look after myself. And I might just go for half of the game.
Yes.
Or I may go for the whole game. So I've come to these things where I've realized boundaries. I've really been trying to learn boundaries for years, but gosh, having an autoimmune condition really helps you clarify when your boundaries are woolly, because
yes, as
so helpful.
I was recently running one of my retreats, and we were one of the participants. We were all adding things into her journal to learn to say, I'm not available right now, was one of her favorites, but maybe, or maybe later, and all these phrases that we're not brought up to say, and we're brought up to present as being okay and not needy, and not vulnerable. So when I asked you, what book you would recommend for our book list, I wasn't surprised that you said The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown, and Brené Brown's part of the coaching philosophy that you work with. Is that right, Helen?
So Gift of Imperfection was the first of Brené Brown's books that I read, and I was already trained in positive psychology and a certified coach at that point. And her work really kind of cracked me open, because positive psychology is phenomenal, and I really love all of the positive psychology work. But Brené's work focuses on courage and what can get in the way, shame, and all the things. And I think that sometimes you can't really, sometimes that's where the work is versus, it's both and really. I just think once I felt like those two pieces came together really beautifully. And then I put on my vision board years ago that I would want to study with her. And then when she started doing certified facilitators, I trained in the Daring Way, which was her first body of work, and became a certified Daring Way facilitator. And then subsequently a certified Dare to Lead facilitator. And so I, doing a lot of this work in the leadership space as well, but it feels like my work to do. It's like my heart work.
Yes, well, I completely understand what you mean by that. Aren't we lucky to be able to do our heart work and, alongside sickness.
Yes. Yes.
And thinking about how curious life is, because before you got ill, and before you even trained as a coach, you had a degree in psychological sciences, and you've been very much involved in research, medical and clinical research, and you have a PhD in gastrointestinal research. Is that right?
Yes, I
And
do.
how useful that must have been when you've been looking at holistic ways of healing. And I think a really important thing for us to emphasize is that you and I neither of us are presenting as healed. It's like we have conditions.
Yeah.
And we I love what you talk about in terms of thriving. You talk about tipping towards thriving or pivoting to thriving, because what you're talking about is not straining, not going through some sort of punishing detox exercise regime, but just like little changes that won't stress our system. Because I think the most crucial thing to me is the nervous system. And we were saying, probably when you were doing your research and when I was doing my training as a psychotherapist, we didn't know what we now know about neuroscience. And we're going to try really hard not to get nerdy about neuroscience. Not this episode, anyway. If we want to do a Miriam and Helen get nerdy about neuroscience episode, we can definitely line one up and do that. But this understanding that you're able to bring from Brené Brown's studies, from neuroscience, from medical and clinical research, how does that tie in with what you're trying to offer others and what you offer yourself in terms of healing? I suppose it's healing but not healed.
Yes. Yes. And I often talk about well-being versus wellness. Is So I just want to go back and say I'm a physiologist.
A physiologist, right?
Yeah. And my I often make a joke, but my PhD was in inflammatory bowel disease, and so I was on the mucus team, and so I had a freezer full of poop and mucus. That was what I researched. Fabulous. So I feel like I feel like, and then I went from medical research into clinical research and worked in various different systems, from heart disease to migraine to asthma to early stage cancer studies. So I sort of worked in various different areas. I would say I am such a learner that I love to learn about different things and then see. I'm hoping my application is getting better now, but I really do like to nerd out on the learning. But it does feel like a full circle moment for me, because now all of this neuroscience, like last year I did a course on the neuroscience of change for coaches, and understanding how our brains work. It's just fascinating. And then now all this, just last week, I read an article about vagus nerve stimulators in clinical trials for rheumatoid arthritis. And it was an NPR article, so you can tell I'm going to dive right into that and take that to my
Yeah.
rheumatologist next week. So, I
Yes.
mean, all of these things I geek out on the physiology because I think it's just, I just love physiology. But I think what it brings is there's an evidence-based approach to my work, whether I'm working with
Yes. Yes.
anything from a physiological or a, sort of medical side, and also positive psychology. So with a lot of clients, either in my leadership coaching practice or in, because I work for this company called P-Link Leadership, which is a phenomenal company doing transformational leadership development. We talk about well-being, but we actually take it from the science of well-being, from Martin Seligman's work on PERMA and,
Yes.
how we can actually create well-being. And what I also took from that work on well-being and flourishing is that, the idea behind the science of well-being is that you can have well-being even on your deathbed.
Yes.
Which, so positive emotion, engagement, relationship, meaning, accomplishment, like these things, we can put things in these buckets. And
Yeah.
so I love bringing that in to the work that I do, whether it's with leaders or whether it's with people who have autoimmune conditions, or whether it's bringing that into the podcast.
Yes. Well, the podcast is where I'd like to go next, because I suppose at some point we're going to have to conclude this interview, and I'm sure listeners will be just as I am, wanting to hear more. There's so many more things I want to ask, and I'm trying to calm down, and so that we can conclude this and maybe have another conversation. I'd love for you to come on again, but if we want to hear more, of course, you explore a lot of this on the podcast. So tell me about how that came about, and tell me a bit more about Nona.
Oh, Nona Jordan is just an exceptional human being. And I was lucky to meet her in coach training back in 2009. And we've been friends since. And I've actually done a lot of her courses, and I learned a ton from her. So she's almost a friend mentor. And what I would say is, and last year, Nona was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and she reached out to me and said, "Hey, this is sort of what's happening," because she obviously knew my rheumatoid arthritis journey. And actually, rheumatoid arthritis and MS are more similar than rheumatoid arthritis is with arthritis. So we were sort of in conversation, and she said to me, "Look, if I've got to get this expletive sandwich, let's make some meaning out of it. How
Yeah.
about we do a podcast? Because it is so lonely. We wanted to have a place where people would share their stories and and their experience on how they thrive. So it's about living fully with a chronic condition. It's not about healed, because that may not be possible, but it's about how do we do that?" And so she said, "I've got this idea. Do you want to do this with me?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm all in." And she said, "Let's do for the first season, what do you wish somebody had whispered to you? Because I'm sort of 6 years in, that you wish you'd known right at the beginning. And let's
Yes.
make that the first season." So we passed out all the things that we wish we'd known. And that was the whole first season, just the two of us. We start recording in 2 weeks, our second season, and now we're interviewing other people with autoimmune or chronic conditions, to hear other people's stories and what they do to thrive. So it's definitely real and authentic, and like we talk about the hard things, but we are pivoting to, and
Yes.
how do you live fully?
Yes. Yes.
What are you learning? What do you want others to know? How do
Yes.
you tip towards thriving? Because I think with autoimmunity, it's that roller coaster where and any particular day you don't know what you're going to have in terms of fatigue, in terms of symptoms, in terms of anything. And so you need to have these tools at your fingertips
Yes, yes.
to kind of, well, is this a rest day? Am I going to, so all the different things. And so we touched on those in the first season, and I'm really excited to hear other people's stories
Yes,
in this next
yes.
season.
What do you do? What do you do to pivot towards thriving?
Well, so I find that yoga really helps me. Some movement, walking in nature, time with my loves. I also have a fluffy love who's asleep under here. That a little mini golden doodle who is lovely. I love to read. I love to walk with friends. I love to watch funny shows. I love to laugh.
Yes, yes.
The beach. I love my sister time. I haven't mentioned my sisters. My sisters have been in my camp. They even flew over to walk the arthritis walk from England. They flew over 3 days last year just to walk that walk with me.
Wow.
I'm really gratitude practice and say meditation.
Yeah. Yes.
Mindfulness. I do that every night. I put on a meditation before I go to sleep. So lots of different things, and rest and sleep. Oh my gosh, sleep.
Sleep, yes.
Sleep.
And
Come on now.
this is something I think that you and I might have in common, which is that, letting go of being driven. And you introduced me to a quote today that I love, the Judith Lassiter one.
Judith Lassiter. She's sort of like the mother of yoga in the US, is how Nona describes her. But Nona gave me this quote when she was doing therapeutic yoga, because she's also trained, she's not just a coach, but she's trained in therapeutic yoga. And she said, I know you can do more, but can you do less?
Can you do less?
You do. And I'm just like, does your whole system go?
It does, and I think this is. I'm gonna make a little thing to print out and stick up for myself this week. I love that quote, and it is. I think for me, and probably for you, it has been coming to terms with, can you do less? And letting ourselves relearn how to do life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would say the other question that I often ask myself is, and often when I'm working with clients, we talk about values, and it's often easy for us to show our values out, but not necessarily in. So my top value is love. And so I'll often ask myself, how am I going to love myself through this? Which often looks like less. I'm going to do less because that would look like love right now. Sometimes it's more, but mostly it's less.
Yeah.
Because it's that self-care and that self-compassion.
Yes. What would love do? Right now. Well, maybe you and I are both ready for a rest after this conversation. Is there a message that you would like our listeners to hear today from you?
I mean, I think it's really what I've been talking about around sometimes with any sort of condition. It can feel isolating and somewhat lonely and certainly overwhelming. And so it's that invite into community where you can find your agency and tip towards thriving and live the life that you want to live, even if it's a different life than you originally imagined. And I think that's really what the podcast is about. And that's really about what my work is about. It's about using your unique blend of genius and applying it to your opportunities and challenges, whatever they are.
I can't add anything to that, Helen. That's just lovely. I've so enjoyed talking to you today. Thank you.
Oh, it's been such an honor. Thank you, Miriam.
Experience therapy with Miriam Grace on a Wise Woman retreat in Derbyshire. Designed for your rest and return to self. Sound baths, a campfire evening, group therapy, reflexology and gentle yoga are threaded through a programme of personal quiet time and journaling.
I've never felt so looked after in my entire life, and I count myself so lucky to have been able to experience the retreat.
You will feel safely held through soulful, psychological and therapeutic elements by your experienced, mature and qualified facilitators.
The joy, the warmth, the generosity, your beautiful home. It was a turning point in my life.
With nutritious home-cooked food and your own double bed, retreats run from Thursday evening to Sunday afternoon at a bespoke venue in the Peak District. For more reviews, search Wise Women Derbyshire on Facebook, Instagram or on the web.
I so desperately want to return. It was just a wonderful experience.
I so enjoyed this time to talk with Helen, who has such a compassionate approach to herself, others and health challenges. I was struck again by the amount of resilience and skills that we've all learned through similar situations and the COVID-19 pandemic. And as we move into the post-COVID era, and for many of us a post-menopausal experience, and we focus on friendship and the skills of connection, let us continue to ask ourselves and each other, I know you can do more, but can you do less? Thank you for listening to Women of Steel, created and hosted by me, Miriam Grace, psychotherapist at Blue Skies. If you'd like to know more about my work as a therapist and writer, you can follow me on social media. Please take a look at the show notes for information and contact details. And in the meantime, be kind to yourself.